Did you know that a pop star from Barbados once flew to Paris and convinced the richest man in Europe to make her a billionaire? We're talking about Rihanna's massive partnership with the CEO of LVMH, Bernard Arnault. But she's not alone in this list. From champagne vineyards to AI boardrooms, Black women are audaciously reshaping French wealth in ways that would make Marie Antoinette's head spin. And trust me, the woman at number 1 would make you jump out of your seat. Number 10. Marie-José Pérec, the track queen turned millionaire tycoon. Let's start with someone who literally ran her way into wealth, then figured out how to make that wealth multiply long after she stopped racing. Marie-José Pérec, 3-time Olympic gold medalist. Born in Guadeloupe, raised in France, and absolutely dominant on the track during the 90s. She won back-to-back Olympic golds in the 400 meters, first in 1992 in Barcelona, then in 1996 in Atlanta. Not only that, but she also snagged gold in the 200 meters in 1996, making her one of the most decorated French athletes in history. But here's the kicker. Marie's net worth now sits around 75 million euros, and she didn't get there by just cashing endorsement checks and calling it a day. Yeah, Nike and Reebok threw serious money at her during her peak years. We're talking 500,000 euros plus equivalents in Olympic bonuses and sponsorship deals. But the smart move was what she did after the medals stopped coming. She diversified. Paris restaurants, fashion lines, sports consulting gigs. Marie turned her image rights into a revenue stream that kept paying long after she stopped running. Media appearances still bring in around 1 million euros annually, which is wild when you consider her last Olympic race was in the late 90s. Now let's talk about the bizarre manner her sprinting career came to an end, because that's where things got really messy. It was the year 2000, and Marie-José was supposed to defend her title in Sydney, en route to cement her legacy as the greatest 400-meter runner ever. But instead, she just didn't show up. Pulled out right before her race, citing injury and later harassment by Australian media, and immediately flew back to France. The rumors went wild. Psychological pressure, panic attacks, reports of her feeling unsafe. The French press had a field day, but instead of doing the PR cleanup tour, Marie-José basically disappeared for a while. After that, she never featured in a major sprinting competition and officially retired in 2004. But she came back, not to racing, but to relevance. Marie became a mentor, started working with younger athletes, did sports consulting, and quietly rebuilt her reputation without ever really apologizing for the Sydney situation. She had a son in 2010, splits her time between France and Guadeloupe, and lives the kind of quiet luxury lifestyle that doesn't scream for attention. She took the platform that athletics gave her and turned it into multi-generational wealth while everyone else was still talking about what happened in Sydney. Number 9. Diana Brondie, teaching French teenagers how to do banking. Most people don't think about teen banking until their kid asks for a debit card. But Diana Brondie saw an entire underserved market sitting there and built a fintech company around it. She's the founder of Zollis, a Paris-based digital banking platform designed specifically for French teenagers and their parents. Think of it like a training wheels bank account, except it's regulated, secure, and built inside France's notoriously strict financial compliance framework. Zollis is valued somewhere between 10 to 15 million euros, which is early-stage territory, but here's what makes it smart. She's targeting a generation that never walks into a physical bank. Gen Z doesn't want to talk to a teller. They want an app. They want instant notifications. They want their parents to send them money without a lecture. Diana's background? Société Générale, one of France's biggest traditional banks. So she knows exactly how slow and clunky the legacy system is. And instead of trying to fix it from the inside, she just built a faster version for a younger audience. She's raised around 1.5 million euros in seed funding, which signals investor confidence that teen banking isn't just a gimmick. It's a category. And in a country where financial literacy is barely taught in schools, giving teenagers their own banking infrastructure could be a generational shift. The long game here is to lock in users early. If Zollis becomes their first banking experience, they might never switch. That's customer lifetime value on steroids. Plus, she's operating in France, where banking regulations are strict enough to make your eyes glaze over. The fact that she got Zalise approved and functional means she's navigating bureaucracy most founders would quit over. It's not flashy or controversial, but it's positioned perfectly for a market that traditional banks keep ignoring. Number 8. Cindy Bruna, the Parisian who became a global runway fixture. Cindy Bruna grew up in the Paris suburbs, which in France is code for a whole set of assumptions about class, immigration, and who gets access to what. The suburbs aren't just geographic, they're social markers. And breaking into high fashion from there? That's not supposed to happen. But Cindy did it anyway, and she did it through the very system that's built to keep people like her out. Paris Fashion Week became her launching pad. Chanel, Balmain, Jean Paul Gaultier, Versace, she walked for all of them, over and over, building a career that's worth somewhere around 2 to 3 million euros. What makes Cindy's story different from some of the other models on this list is that she managed to straddle two worlds without getting typecast. On one hand, she's a Paris couture regular, the kind of model who gets booked for the shows that matter. On the other hand, she became a Victoria's Secret angel, which is a completely different lane: American, commercial, mass market sexy. Most models get stuck in one category or the other. Either you're high fashion and untouchable, or you're commercial and accessible. Cindy somehow became both, which is rare enough that it's worth pointing out. Her social media following sits around 500,000 plus, which isn't astronomical by influencer standards, but it's solid enough to generate real income. And unlike models who chase virality, Cindy plays the long game. She's consistent, she's professional, she shows up, does the work, and doesn't create messy headlines. Which, honestly, might be why she's not more famous. Scandal sells, chaos gets clicks. But Cindy's approach is the opposite. She's built a steady, sustainable career in an industry that chews people up and spits them out. The other thing people overlook about Cindy is that she's French-born, French-raised, and Paris-based. A lot of models fly into Paris for Fashion Week and leave. Cindy is Paris. She represents a version of the city that the tourism brochures don't show. Diverse, complex, working-class roots turned into high-fashion success. France loves to talk about égalité, but the fashion industry has historically been one of the least equal spaces imaginable. Cindy's career is proof that the barriers are real, but they're not insurmountable. You just have to be twice as good and 3 times as persistent. Number 7. Marie Assé, building the boring tech that runs French banks. Okay, this one's not that hot. There's no runway, no drama, no feuds with Anna Wintour. But Marie Assé is making bank quite literally by solving one of the most unsexy problems in finance: compliance paperwork. She's the CEO of Clustock, a Paris-based platform that helps financial institutions manage client onboarding documents. Think of it like this. When you open a bank account and they ask for 47 different PDFs, Marie built the software that makes sure all that chaos doesn't implode. Her clients? French banks. European financial institutions. The kind of organizations that move billions and cannot afford a single compliance screw-up. Clustock has raised around $850,000 in funding, which sounds modest compared to billionaires. But here's what people overlook. She's not selling ads or chasing influencers. She's embedded in France's financial infrastructure, the unglamorous plumbing that keeps money moving. And in fintech, especially in Europe where regulations are tighter than airport security, that's actual power. See, flashy consumer apps come and go. But if you're the software that banks need to stay compliant with EU law, that's recurring revenue. That's leverage. That's the kind of boring that pays mortgages in Paris's 6th arrondissement. Marie's also part of a broader shift. Black women building B2B tech in spaces that have traditionally been old, white, and male. She's not trying to disrupt banking with crypto or some Silicon Valley fever dream. She's just making the existing system work better and getting paid every time it does. No Instagram hype and no TikTok virality. Just solid, profitable, compliance tech that French institutions literally can't operate without. Rank 6. Rebecca. Cathline. Turning black hair into a Paris tech play. If you've ever tried to book a hairstylist in Paris who actually knows what to do with afro-textured hair, you know it's basically a scavenger hunt. You're scrolling Instagram DMs, asking friends, hoping someone's cousin knows someone. Cathline saw that mess and said, "Yeah, I'm building an app for this." Enter Ma Coiffeuse Afro, a Paris-based platform that connects women with afro-textured hair to stylists who specialize in it. Think Uber, but for braids, locks, and twists. Now, around 160,000 users later, Rebecca has turned a personal frustration into a legitimate tech business. She's raised around 350,000 euros in funding, which isn't unicorn money, but here's the thing. She's monetizing a gap that mainstream French beauty has ignored for decades. France loves to talk about universalism, but that philosophy conveniently forgot that not all hair is the same. So while Sephora was stocking 50 shades of blonde dye, Black women were DIYing their hair care or traveling across the city just to find someone who wouldn't butcher their edges. Rebecca didn't wait for L'Oreal to figure it out. She just built the infrastructure herself. And the beauty of this model? It's scalable. Right now it's France, but Afro hair exists everywhere. London, Brussels, Berlin, every major European city has this same problem. Ma Coiffeuse Afro could expand horizontally without reinventing the wheel. She's also doing this in a country where tech funding for women, especially Black women, is borderline non-existent. French VCs are still stuck funding the 47th food delivery app, while Rebecca is building a category that didn't even have a name before she showed up. It's not just a business, it's logistics, identity, and community wrapped into one platform. And every time someone books a stylist through her app, she's proving that Black beauty isn't niche, it's just underserved. Number 5. Stephanie Nenta, Ambianda, selling diversity to companies that don't want it. Here's the wildest business model on this list. Convincing French corporations who are famously terrible at diversity that they need AI to hire better. Stephanie Nenta Ambianda is the founder of Extra Mile, a Paris-based recruitment platform that uses AI to reduce bias in hiring. Her clients include luxury brands, finance firms, and corporate France, aka the same industries that have historically been about as diverse as a baguette factory. She's raised over 1.5 million euros, including backing from Google for Startups Black Founders Fund, which is both validation and irony. Google's essentially funding someone to fix the problem that tech companies like Google helped create. But here's where it gets interesting. Stephanie isn't just pitching diversity as a moral good. She's pitching it as efficiency. Her platform helps companies find talent they would have overlooked because their hiring managers have unconscious bias baked into every decision. And in France, where even talking about race in corporate settings makes people uncomfortable, that's a tightrope walk. French law doesn't even allow companies to collect racial data. So Stephanie has to sell diversity without explicitly naming what she's fixing. It's like being a plumber who's not allowed to say the word pipe. Still, she's closing deals. Luxury brands want to look progressive. Finance firms are under pressure from EU regulations. And Extra Mile is positioned right at that intersection of compliance, optics, and actual results. The masala here, she's monetizing the problem of French corporate homogeneity. Every time a company realizes they've been hiring the same type of person for 30 years, Stephanie's software is there with a solution and an invoice. It's the kind of business that only works because the problem is so widespread. And honestly, that's both brilliant and a little depressing. Number 4. Jourdan Dunn, the Prada moment that broke Paris fashion. Paris Fashion Week. Prada's runway show. Jourdan Dunn walks out, and something shifts that most people in the audience don't even consciously register. She's the first Black model to walk for Prada in over a decade. Not a few years, but a full decade. Let that sink in for a second. One of the biggest luxury houses in the world went 10 years without putting a single Black woman on their Paris runway. And when Jourdan finally broke through, it wasn't because Prada suddenly had a moral awakening. It was because she was undeniable. By the time she hit that runway, the fashion world had already started buzzing about her. She'd done campaigns, walked other shows, built momentum, but Prada was different. Prada was the validation, the stamp that said, "Okay, fine, we can't ignore this anymore." And here's the thing about Jourdan. She didn't just open the door and leave. She stayed. Balmain, Dior, the Paris couture circuit. She became a fixture. Her net worth sits around $13 million now, built on high-paying runway contracts, European luxury endorsements, and the kind of commercial visibility that keeps you relevant long after your peak modeling years. But the real story is what happened after that Prada show. Suddenly, other houses started reconsidering their casting. Suddenly, the "we just didn't find the right fit" excuse didn't hold water anymore. Jourdan's presence forced a reckoning, whether Paris wanted it or not. And France, to its credit, or maybe just out of pragmatism, repositioned itself. Black models started appearing more frequently. Diversity became part of the conversation, even if it was mostly performative at first. But none of that happens without someone like Jourdan proving the business case. She turned what should have been a normal career milestone into a cultural inflection point. And the luxury industry, which loves to pretend it's above politics, had to admit it had been deliberately exclusionary for years. What's wild is that Jourdan's breakthrough wasn't even that long ago. We're talking about 2008, not 1968. This is recent history, which means the Paris fashion world's resistance to black models wasn't some relic of a bygone era. It was active, ongoing policy until someone forced their hand. Jourdan forced their hand, and she got paid doing it. Number 3. Aya Nakamura, France's biggest music export that France tried to reject. Aya Nakamura is the most streamed female artist in France. Not one of, but the most streamed. Her song, Jaja, became one of the most played French tracks globally, racking up hundreds of millions of streams and dominating charts across Europe, Africa, and the French-speaking world. Her net worth sits somewhere between 8 to 10 million euros, built on music sales, YouTube revenue, estimated around 500,000 to 700,000 euros annually, massive European tours, and endorsement deals with brands like Nike. So you'd think France would be celebrating her, right? Rolling out the red carpet, claiming her as a national treasure, putting her on postage stamps, or whatever countries do when their artists go global. Instead, France had a full-blown identity crisis. When Aya was considered for the Paris 2024 Olympics cultural program, a chunk of the French establishment lost their minds. Politicians criticized her language. Cultural commentators said she didn't represent real French music. There were literal debates about whether her style and persona were appropriate for an event meant to showcase France to the world. And here's the kicker. Aya is French. Born in France, raised in France, built her entire career through the French music ecosystem. But because she's black, because she sings in a mix of French and slang, because her sound pulls from Afrobeat and R&B instead of Edith Piaf, suddenly she's controversial. The whole thing exposed something ugly that France would rather not talk about. The country loves to pride itself on universalism and cultural openness. But the second a black woman dominates the charts on her own terms, the old guard starts clutching its pearls. Meanwhile, Aya just kept winning. She topped the SNEP charts. She sold out shows across Europe. She became a fashion fixture at Paris Fashion Week, front row at major shows, wearing designers who clearly understood her cultural cash even if the political class didn't. What makes Aya's position so powerful is that she didn't ask for permission. She didn't try to sand down her edges or make herself more palatable to French elites. She just made music that resonated with millions of people, and the industry had no choice but to follow the money. She represents modern France, whether the old institutions like it or not. The France that's multilingual, multicultural, plugged into global black music culture, and completely indifferent to whether the Académie Française approves. And honestly, the controversy probably made her more money. Every think piece, every debate, every politician who said she didn't belong, free publicity. Aya turned cultural rejection into commercial dominance, which is maybe the most French thing she could have done. Number 2. Naomi Campbell, the supermodel. Paris never cancelled. Naomi Campbell has been a fixture of Paris Fashion Week since the late 80s, which means she's been working French runways longer than some of the models walking them have been alive. Yves Saint Laurent, Jean-Paul Gaultier, Dior, Versace. If it was a major Paris show, Naomi was probably there. Her net worth hovers around $80 million, which she's built through decades of modeling contracts, luxury endorsements, brand ambassadorships, and just being Naomi Campbell. Because at a certain point, your name becomes the product. But here's what makes Naomi's relationship with Paris fascinating. She's had a career full of explosive moments: the temper tantrums, the lawsuits, the phone-throwing incident that became tabloid gold. The kind of behavior that would have gotten most people blacklisted from polite society, let alone high fashion. And yet, Paris never really canceled her. Sure, there were controversies. Sure, people whispered. But when it came time to cast a show or shoot a campaign, Naomi kept getting the call. Because the French fashion industry has always operated on a very specific principle. If you're profitable, you're forgivable. Naomi was, and still is, profitable. She moves product. She generates press. She commands attention in ways that most models never will. So the industry absorbed her chaos, monetized it even, and kept her in rotation. There's something almost cynical about it, but also pragmatic. Paris fashion isn't a moral arbiter. It's a business. And Naomi understood that better than most. She knew her value, and she leveraged it ruthlessly. She still appears in Vogue France. She still shows up at major Paris events. She still maintains residences across Europe, including in France. At this point, she's less a model and more an institution, a walking, talking piece of fashion history that Paris has decided to protect because the alternative would be admitting they enabled her for decades. And maybe that's the real masala here. Naomi's career is a mirror that reflects back exactly how the fashion industry works. It's not about ethics or behavior. It's about power, money, and whether you can still sell the fantasy. Naomi sold it for 30+ years, and Paris bought every second. And now, we head to the #1 spot on this list, where sits a woman who operates at an entirely different scale. Number 1. Rihanna, the Barbadian who made Paris validate her billions. When Rihanna decided to launch Fenty Beauty in 2017, she didn't do it in New York or Los Angeles, and that was a deliberate decision. She flew to Paris and partnered with Bernard Arnault, the CEO of LVMH and literally one of the richest people on the planet. And in doing so, she became the first Black woman and the youngest person ever to head an LVMH luxury maison. Let's pause on that for a while. LVMH is the luxury conglomerate. Louis Vuitton, Dior, Givenchy, Moet, Dom Perignon. If it screams expensive European elegance, LVMH probably owns it. This is the kind of institution that has historically operated like an exclusive club where your application gets laughed out of the room if your last name doesn't sound like it belongs on a chateau. Rihanna walked in and convinced them to make her a billionaire. Her net worth fluctuates between $1.4 and $1.7 billion depending on Fenty's valuation at any given moment. And she owns roughly 50% of Fenty Beauty, which reportedly pulled in over $550 million in annual revenue by 2022. The brand's Paris headquarters anchored its distribution across France, Europe, and the Middle East, with Sephora France becoming one of the early retail engines that made the whole thing explode. But here's the part that people miss when they talk about Rihanna's business success. Paris didn't just host Fenty, Paris validated it. For decades, American fashion houses and beauty brands treated Black women like an afterthought. Foundation shades stopped at medium tan. Luxury marketing featured the same narrow definition of beauty over and over. The industry essentially said, "We don't need you." So Rihanna went to France and built her empire there instead. And the crazy part? Paris initially doubted her too. French fashion elites weren't sure if a pop star could pull off luxury. They weren't sure if inclusive beauty was a real market or just a trend. They gave her a chance mostly because Bernard Arnault is a ruthless businessman who saw dollar signs, not because the industry was suddenly enlightened. But Fenty Beauty launched with 40 foundation shades when most brands were offering 10. It centered darker skin tones instead of treating them like an optional expansion pack. And it became a cultural reset so massive that every major beauty brand had to scramble to catch up. Suddenly, brands that spent decades ignoring Black women were falling over themselves to release inclusive shade ranges. Fenty didn't just succeed, It forced the entire industry to admit they'd been leaving money on the table for years because of their own biases. The Fenty Maison fashion line paused in 2021, which some people saw as a failure. But the cosmetics side kept compounding, kept printing money, kept proving that Rihanna understood her audience better than the so-called experts ever did. And the real story here is that Rihanna's wealth is France-enabled, not France-adjacent. LVMH gave her the infrastructure, the manufacturing muscle, the distribution networks, the cultural legitimacy that comes with Paris runway influence. Without that partnership, Fenty might have been successful, but it wouldn't have been this successful. France didn't just benefit from Rihanna. Rihanna used France to build something American fashion houses told her she couldn't have. And these were the 10 richest black women in France. Which one of these females impressed you the most? Let us know in the comments, and for more such crazy peeks into the lives of rich black individuals, take a look at Black Status.